welcome to Police K9 Radio. Rich, what's going on?
Kind of came in for an emergency meeting here today, and not a full podcast, but we felt like we needed to address something that was going on in the news out here in California. Very recently, on February 13th, Assemblyman Corey Jackson presented a bill, Assembly Bill 742, which essentially states that police canines should no longer be used to arrest anyone, apprehend, and also no more crowd control with canines, which, as far as I know, we haven't been doing crowd control with canines since the 60s, at least as part of, a regular basis. Yeah,
not in our area anyway. None of the agencies that we train use them currently for crowd control. And I mean, for a number of reasons, right? Like, just for what you mentioned. And then number two, it's really hard sometimes to integrate a canine effectively and safely for everybody if it is a crowd control situation and you've got people throwing bottles or moving forward, or, just kind of the chaos that goes on in those events. Sometimes the dog is not the best tool anyway. So really that portion doesn't affect us at all.
And I think we can legitimately look back to the 60s when the civil rights stuff was going on, and seeing the use of dogs and fire hoses and all those kind of things were absolutely inappropriate. And that's not the way we want to utilize dogs in 2023. That's just not the right thing to do.
Yeah, so what we want to do is talk a little bit about the bill, and then we're going to talk about how it relates to actual reality versus kind of what they're trying to paint police dogs as. And then we're going to talk about what we can do as an industry. For those of you that are in law enforcement, for those of you that are working police dogs, that are supervisors within an agency, we're going to talk about, hey, what's our next step here, and what can we do to help really educate the public and do some of those things that we should have probably been doing before, but really it's kind of an imperative.
Yeah. I think first thing we need to talk about is what kind of crimes and what kind of criminals are we using dogs on now? And you work with several agencies. You're responsible for training several agencies. I know you're up to date on a lot of their policies, and just the Graham versus Connor and the law that kind of dictates where we're allowed to use force in California. Can you explain to the listeners who aren't involved in law enforcement what kind of crime and what kind of criminal are we using canines on?
Yeah. So, and you bring up a good point, Rich. So, most of you guys that are listening to this right now may be canine handlers, or want to be canine handlers, or are already involved in law enforcement. You have an understanding of when we can deploy a dog. And there's a lot of the public that has no idea when we can. And they don't know that we already have guidelines that we're working under, right? So, and whose fault is that? I'm going to point the finger at me and at Rich and at you guys listening to this, that I don't think we educate the public enough about what our dogs do and what we can and can't do with our dogs. So, and in the world of social media and everything that's out there, there's really no excuse for it. But this bill hopefully will light a fire under law enforcement to get more proactive in educating the public. So, but number one, there are a couple things that guide us in our abilities and our decision making when it comes to deploying canines. We have a policy, and we also have case law to rely on. And the policy basically mirrors the case law that's out there. So number one, we're going to consider the seriousness of the offense. We need to have a serious crime, and I'm not talking misdemeanor felony. I'm talking about a crime that involves violence, typically. So number two, do we have active resistance? Is the person running? Are they hiding? Are they refusing to come out? Are they concealed in an area that would otherwise be unsafe to get into that area? And that's why we would use a police dog. Number three, are they a threat, and is the threat articulable to officers and the public? And then number four, we consider all of these things before we deploy the dog. And then once we say, okay, the dog fits this category, we have a serious crime, the person is resisting, either physically, they're running, they're a danger to the public, they're hiding in somebody's backyard, we believe they're armed, they're dangerous for police to go in there and to search for them, because ultimately the dog is leading officers into an ambush. A suspect that's running is basically, he gets to choose where the confrontation is going to take place and how it's going to take place. Just so for those of you that haven't done this job, the officer's behind a dog, generally with flashlights. It's no secret where we're at. and the suspect gets to hide in a dark place and just wait for officers to come upon him. And if he's armed, I mean, he has the tactical advantage on law enforcement. And for so long, these dogs have kind of given us back that advantage. So we consider all of those things before we deploy a dog. Case law states, our policy states that we will give opportunities for peaceful surrender. And what that means is we give announcements from the handler. We give announcements from a helicopter. We give announcements from PA systems. We continue to give announcements throughout the search. So generally, before a dog bites a suspect, there has been numerous announcements, and usually a long period of time has passed. They have a lot of opportunity to give us that peaceful surrender. So, I mean, that's what we're looking at. We're doing all of those things. We're not out there just deploying on a petty theft and somebody runs away.
Right. And let's talk about what happens. Now we take the dog out of that scenario. Same serious crime, same serious criminal is now hiding in a place where they have a tactical advantage, or at least we meet in the middle with that. The dog's out of it. Now we have armed officers that are out searching for a dangerous human, and they run into each other without the presence of a dog. The opportunity for a deadly encounter to happen from both the suspect and the officer's side now increases, tenfold, right? Or more. So the opportunity now for that officer to have to shoot somebody because they're met with deadly force with somebody who's hiding with a tactical advantage goes through the roof. So removing the dog from that situation puts everybody's life at risk at a much higher ratio.
Yeah, and so what you're talking about, Rich, you're talking about, number one, officers are at a greater risk, right? So we just talked about the suspect having an opportunity to lie in wait for the officer. So their job just got more dangerous. Not that it's not dangerous enough as it is. We've got the suspect's life is now more at risk. And why is that? Now, I don't want to get into too many anecdotal stories, but I can tell you just off the top of my head, I can tell you there's 4 instances where the dog has saved the officer's life, and I can name numerous situations where the dog saved the suspect's life. And a lot of you listeners might be, well, how's the dog saving a suspect's life? Well, when we're out searching for a suspect, if they are lying in wait, and my own personal experience of a suspect having a knife in his hand laying on top of it, and I think he was waiting for us to make our approach. My dog goes in, bites him. He now deals with the dog. He rolls over. We're able to go in, take control of the dog, take control of his arms, get him into custody. If he would have rolled over and had that knife in his hand, we typically that'd be a lethal force situation for officers. So either an officer gets stuck with a knife or the suspect gets shot. And in talking with our handlers, I mean, we have other numerous stories of suspects waiting at the doorway for officers to come in with a knife. Dog goes in, bites him, he drops a knife, they go in. Again, that suspect would have been killed, an officer would have been killed. The dog is a de-escalation tool. And that's one thing that you will not hear from these assembly members is that they want to paint them out as vicious dogs that are killing people. Let's talk about that too. They try to paint them out as these dogs are killers, and we know that's not the truth.
How many actual deaths have been caused by a police canine that we know of?
Yeah, there's 3 documented. And we're talking about police dogs that have been used since
not in California.
No, not in California. Yeah. I think one of them was in California, right. And that was a suspect that hid in a mechanic's pit with his neck exposed. And that was in the 90s, I believe. So we're talking 70 years at least of police canine use. We have 3 documented, and let's put this in perspective because there's been 3. Okay, well, according to Wikipedia, as my source, from 1978 to 1995, there were 37 people killed by vending machines. So somebody not getting their Cheetos out, getting angry with the machine, it crushes them. So I would not consider vending machines deadly, and yet there's 10 times more likely of a chance of getting killed by a vending machine than police dogs. From 2006 to 2021, 444 people were killed by lightning, right? So, and I bet you could find instances where people step off a curb and they fell, they hit their head, they died. So three lives, lost in 70 years with police dogs does not constitute deadly force. As a matter of fact, there's 15 cases out there right now that say dogs are not deadly force. And
we all know that any of us have been doing this for any length of time. We all know at least one dog situation where a dog saved a suspect's life.
Well, yes, 100%. And we had Kyle Schoberg in here Shots Fired podcast. He told a story about the running gun battle he got into. That dog saved his life.
Yeah, and potentially several citizens.
Yes. Yeah. And if they had not have caught that individual, he was there to kill his ex-girlfriend. And that's the thing I wish the public would understand is, officers are out there searching for these individuals that are hiding in backyards and in front yards and breaking into houses, right? And officers are putting their life on the line so the suspect doesn't jeopardize the life of anybody in the public, anybody in those houses. And so by taking this tool away from them, I mean, we talked about it earlier. We lost the carotid, with the George Floyd incident. That had nothing to do with the carotid. And you had your own.
It was 2,000 miles away from where we are. That happened. We lose the carotid out here. I talked about it before. I was in a situation where I was fighting for my life. The only option that I had to end that fight was either carotid or I shoot the guy. And I used the carotid and was able to safely take him into custody. The next step was, I'm not going to make it out of this fight alive. I'm going to shoot this human, right? So now we take the carotid away, we take the dog away, we start taking tools away that we know de-escalate situations, and the only things that officers are left with are deadly force.
Yeah.
Or no force at all.
Yeah. So, police dogs, they're trying to take police dogs, and then what's next? Are they okay? We're going to look at tasers, batons, and we're going to look at batons, and then what are we left with?
Right. Verbal and shoot them.
Yeah.
That's a ridiculous option for officers to be left with. And if you want to see people get injured on a higher rate, take away the tools that de-escalate these scenarios, and the only thing that's going to be left is either we don't show up or officers are left with deadly force as their only option. It's pretty inappropriate. This came out, this Assembly bill was introduced on the 13th, so the beginning of the week, and so far, I just looked online today, the chief from Fresno is center of the state here in California, the chief Paco Balarama came out with some stats from their agency, and I'm going to look at them because I didn't commit them to memory, but we know that their agency in 2022, they had 580 open area searches, so outside of a building, and 772 business searches. Their dogs were responsible for 486 arrests, and less than 0.5% of all of those scenarios resulted in a bite. 0.38% of all of those resulted in a bite on a suspect. And I would venture to say, based on what we know with agencies and our groups, that is pretty representative of the agencies that we're working with. Small single percentage bite ratio where hundreds of deployments and less than 5% of those end up in a bite. And we know we have agencies that are zero, right? Deploy all year long, and they don't end up with any bites. They have suspects that are giving up, surrendering to the presence of a dog. And that's something else to talk about, is just the presence of a dog frequently results in a give up by a suspect who comes to their senses because the dog is there.
Sure. I mean, a suspect that's committed a serious crime, they are not following orders, right? So they're in that resistance category. They present themselves as a threat. They're not searched. Maybe the crime involved a weapon. We believe they still have the weapon on them. And we bring the dog out and the dog's barking. There are a lot of individuals out there that they want nothing to do with the dog. And simply the presence of the dog barking, that'll de-escalate the situation. And, basically, like, we didn't have to use any force. Right. But I tell you what, if they know we cannot apprehend with a dog, then the dog barking means nothing.
Why not keep running?
Let's keep moving.
Why not keep hiding? And those places that people are hiding are in your backyard, in your place of business, in your neighborhood, and is all we can do is let me see if we can find them. We're obviously nowhere near as good at finding bad guys as the dogs are. The dogs are much better at it than we are. They have amazing sense of smell.
Sure, 100%.
They're trained to do it. We're not. People can hide in here. A cop come in, look under things, look under the table.
Yeah, I see it all the time at training.
Next thing you know, there's a guy hiding in the dryer or the dishwasher or something. Criminals are pretty dedicated to not being found. So the importance of having the dog there as a locating tool is huge.
Yeah. So just like we discussed, safer for the police, safer for the suspect, and we find a lot more people. So ultimately safer for the public. So.
Can we talk about what agencies should be doing to get that information out there? And we're seeing it in agencies that we train with. The information that is important in this type of scenario is not being put out as often as it could be.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm guilty as everybody else. I don't like talking to the media. I always get afraid like they're going to twist my words. They're going to come out, film canine training for 4 hours, and then they're going to take the 10 seconds where the dog didn't do what he was supposed to do and then play that over and over again. So I have not been as proactive as I could have been. We actually had a reporter show up to one of our trainings just on Wednesday. Today's Friday. Today's the 17th. And everybody's like, oh, God, there's somebody from the press. And nobody wanted to venture out. Nobody wanted to talk to them. And honestly, that's my initial reaction. And we need to get over that. We need to get out there and get in front of the public and educate them on exactly what we're talking about. Hey, when can we deploy the dog? Hey, let's talk about some other things that we're doing with the dog, right? Let's talk about the PR aspect. Let's talk about the outreach that we do to our communities, the demos that we do for schools. We need to be our own best ambassador instead of what we tend to do as an industry is it's like, oh.
Yeah, hide from because we're going to get screwed over somehow by the media. And that's irresponsible because then we let somebody else dictate the narrative on what's going on. And it's just not fair to the canine handlers. It's not fair to the canines. It's not fair to police departments. These are an amazing tool that can be used to keep people from being hurt. And it happens all the time. As an agency, when your dog goes out and it finds a bad guy and that bad guy gives up, somebody needs to take the time to do a press release because that happens all the time. And that's what people want to see. It's 2023, right? We were talking about de-escalation, especially in California, and what kind of tools that officers have available to them. A dog is an incredible de-escalation tool. We just talked about that a second ago. If your dog is finding somebody and that results in no use of force, that's an amazing press release, and that's what people want to hear about. And that's primarily what dogs do.
Yeah.
It's not, we're not going out and finding guys and biting guys on a daily basis. We're going out and the dog's showing up and they're finding them and the guy gives up, or the dog's coming out and barking a few times and the guy gives up. That's 90% of the time.
And unfortunately, what does the public see, right? What is sexy? What is like the most exciting thing on YouTube, right? When it comes to police dogs.
Sure.
It's the bite. It's the bite. And then it's the dog not letting go. Right. And then it's the bad bite. And it's the accidental bite. Right. And that's, if you go on YouTube and you put in police canines, a lot of times you'll see all of the bad stuff.
Or the sexy stuff.
Yeah.
It's like watching Cops though, right? I grew up watching Cops. It was cool. For some reason, they never showed report writing.
Yeah.
Those guys, the camera crews ride around with those guys for a week and they get enough for 30 minutes of footage, right? But then you go to the job and you're like, well, what the hell? I'm in report writing.
Yeah, people that go to the academy are sadly reality falls upon them. Like, what is all this other crap I got to do?
What is this going on?
So again, we are letting the media basically dictate and all the exciting type stuff that's gone wrong on YouTube, and that's what some people think that police dogs are all about. So what can we do? And Rich, you hit the nail on the head. If you are working a dog, if you're a supervisor, if you're involved in law enforcement in any way, there should be a social media page, Facebook, Instagram, just to name a couple. And you need to put out there, hey, we got an arrest and a surrender. We found a gun. We found drugs, whatever it is. Hey, we were at the school the other day, and then, hey, we were contacting people in the street, and then have people, if your dog is a nice social dog, if people are petting it, great, get some snapshots. I tell you, I'm going to flash this. I'm going to give these guys kudos because I think they're one of the better in the area of doing this and taking this proactive approach, and it's Concord PD K9. I'm going to put it, if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll appear below. If you're listening to this on our podcast, it's Concord, CONCORD, PD, K, the number 9. Look at their social media account and you'll see, hey, K9 Hancock's at it again. He found, 2 suspects in a drainage ditch. They both surrendered. Everybody goes home safe.
Right.
Are we doing that? Or is it just when something goes wrong? Because, something's going to eventually go wrong.
Sure.
And if that's the only thing that's in the media, then that's what people, that's the reality.
That's how they define you. They're going to define you by your mistakes. And obviously most of the dog's career, most of the cop's career, most of our careers are not mistakes. That's just the stuff that hits the blooper reels and everybody wants to watch that. Oh, they screwed up. it's our job to put the good stuff out there, and it's happening all the time. We can't ignore that.
Yeah. So handlers out there, get with your PIO. Start educating your agency. I would take a proactive approach to contact your local paper. Make sure that your agency is putting the highlights of exactly what you're doing out there. We need to be a better PR machine for what we do. We can't just hide behind that curtain.
Right. And on the agency side, right, there's a lot of, if you have a press, a lieutenant or somebody or a PIO that's doing all the press releases, maybe they are inundated. So maybe you write the press release, hey, we were on this call, dog did this was the result. Hand that to the PIO, let them put that information out. So you're not just throwing work at them. You're like, hey, I know this is extra work, but here's the press release. Obviously go through your chain of command. Don't start doing press releases on your own without talking to somebody, but go through that process and feed them the information that's there. Let them know what's happening. There's a good chance you've gone several months on patrol. You've had your dog out. You've had several people give up. You've searched several houses. You've searched several buildings. Nobody's been bit and nobody's talking about it.
Yeah. So what's the next step here, Rich? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think the big thing is to keep an eye on this assembly bill. I looked up the information today where you can track any assembly bill in California. The information is leginfo.legislator.ca.gov, and obviously we'll put that on the bottom because that's a bunch to talk about. But if you go to Google and just type out leginfo California, it'll pop up. You can track a bill and where it's at. Sounds like the next step for this bill is to go into committee, and it's most likely going to be the Public Safety Committee. Once it makes it to that committee, the assembly persons that are part of that committee can be contacted. You can also contact your assemblyman or assemblywoman in your area. If you're, find out what district you're in and contact your assembly person. Almost all assembly persons in California have a website that you can go to. You can contact them directly, leave a note there, phone call into your assembly person. And then, like I said, once you find out who's on this committee for this specific bill, you can reach out to them. And of course, the author and the co-author, Corey Jackson of District 60 and co-author Ash Carla of District 25 can both be contacted directly about this bill since they are the authors of the bill.
Yeah, and if you're not in California, trust me, we are unfortunately the trendsetters in the nation, and in this situation, definitely unfortunately. So just because you're not in California doesn't mean this isn't going to affect you.
Right. Yep. It's not the best news, but it's something that we need to address as an industry. It's something that we need to address truthfully so we can get what's really going on out there. I think it's very, very comfortable to say that there's not a K9 unit that in California or anywhere else that is race-based. We're not, as a K9 industry, dogs are not going out being used on any individual based on their race, their background, their ethnicity, any of that. They're based on crime and criminality.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the criteria in the beginning, right? That's the criteria we go on, and it doesn't matter the color of your skin. If you fit within that criteria, then we're going to use a police dog to help locate you, because that's the best tool that we have, right? And here's the other thing. What else can we do? We got to make some smart decisions out there.
Yeah.
And this goes nationwide. Like, please don't make this any easier on these assembly people than it should be, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we go out there and we're making smart decisions, and we've talked about this in our previous podcast on it's just a little tag that says losing police dogs or whatever. Right. We've talked about this before. We got to be smarter. We got to be a lot smarter in how we deploy, the tactics that we use, and make sure we're checking all those boxes. And we really need to use the police dog. And in the meantime, like, I think that's, what can we do? Educate and make smart decisions.
Yep. And in the meantime,
train hard.
Be safe.